Hi, I'm Mike Dilk, and you're listening to the Relax Back UK show, the show that explores all kinds of health topics relevant to you, your family, and your friends. Each week, I talk to expert guests from a range of backgrounds to inform and entertain you. So please do join the Relax Back UK family and stay tuned.
Hi, and thank you for joining me on the Relax Back UK show. The topic is one that may seem dull, but is vital to many, many people.
3/4 of UK adults actually do read food labels, which is a surprise. You think you go to a food shop, you throw it in your trolley and you pay for it, and that's pretty much it.
My guest is Katie Glover, an expert in food regulations with NSF. We talk about food labelling and include topics such as veganism, vegetarianism, allergens, supermarket bread, and also a more modern phenomenon.
With the study that we looked at and that we completed at NSF, so 70% of people were wanting more information around the processing and how that product was processed, which is quite a staggering amount of people.
UPF, that is ultra processed foods, gets a look in as well. So we all eat. This is important stuff. So please do join me for a great show. Thank you. So Katie Glover is an expert in food regulations with NSF. So my first question was, what is NSF and what do they do?
So at NSF, we're all about improving planet and human health. We work with brands right across the food chain, making sure that, where we're looking at leveraging science, innovation, looking at partnerships to really help brands out there to ensure that there's life-enhancing products and standards and developments that are created throughout the years for those out there that need the support. So I particularly work in the regulatory landscape within the food division, but we also have various other divisions such as water and the health sciences division.
Okay, but you're a private company that's essentially a consultant to people that are making foods for our consumption to try and keep us all safe.
Yeah, so we're a non-for-profit organisation actually,
Okay.
and we're based our headquarters are over in Ann Arbor in Michigan in America, but I'm based in the UK.
All right. And your expertise, or one of the things you spend a lot of time thinking about, is food labels. Is that right?
It is, yeah. So I'm 10 years in the food label industry.
Okay. No, well, my first question might upset you a bit then. I don't know. Does anyone actually read food labels? I mean, I remember as a child having my cornflakes and then reading the box and thinking, what on earth is niacin and riboflavin? But apart from that, who reads these things? And, do people read these things?
Yeah, so at NSF we conducted some research recently in October, which was all about, what are people's perceptions on food labels, how many people actually read them. And I think some of the interesting statistics that came out of it, which is actually that 3/4 of UK adults actually do read food labels, which is a surprise. You think you go to a food shop, you throw it in your trolley and you pay for it, and that's pretty much it. And that actually does increase for the younger generation. So the 18 to 34-year-olds, that increases to around 82% that actually do read the food labels. So perhaps a bit of a surprise and a bit of a shock that, yeah, there is people out there that are reading it.
Okay, well, so I thought, because I knew I was going to be talking to you, I took my dinner last night and thought, right, I better see if I can find the food label and actually read it. Now, I had pasta, and it was actually pasta parcels. It was very nice. So I won't say who made it, but it was virtually impossible to read the label because, you can see I've got glasses. I need glasses to read. It was so bloody tiny. It was a real chore, first of all, to find it and then read it. It was virtually impossible.
Yeah, I think there's always a bit of an ongoing joke around, do you need a PhD to understand a food label? And without sort of going too into the regulations, there's a mandatory text height that everybody has to abide by. So, nobody's allowed to go beyond below 1.2 millimeters. There's certain factors around that depending on the space of the packaging. But, there's often the question of, is there too much information on the food packaging? What are people actually wanting from that food packaging? So perhaps, what you want and what you're looking for is slightly different to what I'm looking for. And that could be dependent on, your health choices, your lifestyle, perhaps you're buying products for young infants and you want to know the nutrients that are in there. So it's really hard to try and make a food label that accommodates everybody and what everybody's wanting.
No, I can imagine that, absolutely. Because yeah, there was a list of ingredients, and then there's a table saying, well, it gives you the energy and the, kind of what else is here, the sugar content, or it's mainly energy of all the different things. So it's it's quite a complicated list and table. So I can imagine, well, certainly that table I didn't really look at, but what I did look at and I thought was quite interesting. There was information on allergies. So it gives a list of everything that's in it, and then at the bottom it says all the things that you might be interested as far as allergies are concerned are in bold type. Is that normal?
Yeah, so it's a set standard actually across the EU. So it's an EU regulation that governed it, that you must have the allergens set out in a certain way that's obvious to the consumer. So perhaps that's in bold, perhaps that's in italics, perhaps it's in capital letters. So as long as it differentiates from the other ingredients within that food label, it's often then accompanied by, for allergy advice, see ingredients in bold, or perhaps it's, the product may contain certain allergens. So, those statements are voluntary, but you mandatory have to make some sort of typesetting difference with the font to make sure the allergens are clear to the consumers.
Yeah, well, that did seem to work once I got over the tiny size of the writing and sort of turned the light up bright. Because I do wear reading glasses, but they're not that strong, and even so, it was quite hard to read. So, but all right, what sort of allergy help are you likely to see on a food label?
So I think, there's obviously the information within the ingredient list. Then there's the precautionary labels that are set aside of it. And perhaps if, a supermarket's launched a new product and they've changed the ingredients slightly, sometimes you might see an icon on the front of pack that says new allergens, because, if you've been buying the same packet of crisps for the last 3 years and all of a sudden they've changed a manufacturing site that has a different allergen on. So it's worthwhile not just looking at the back of pack, perhaps where the ingredients are, but also, looking at the front of pack, particularly if allergens is something that you need to be conscious of when you're out there buying your food products.
Right. And do you find that producers of food really stick rigidly to these rules and actually take the whole thing seriously?
Yeah, they absolutely do. So, I've worked previously in manufacturing sites, and there is so much on site to ensure that, allergens are correctly accounted for, whether that's on the line as the food's being made, whether that's going onto the packaging to ensure that the consumer, has the right information at the very end. It's a well-known fact within the food industry that some of the biggest recalls is around food allergens. So I'm not going to sit here and say everything's working and everything's perfect, because ultimately we know from recent news stories in the last couple of years where there has been some unfortunate deaths due to allergens, that that isn't the case and more can be done. And recently even the EU Commission came out to say that they think there can be more enhanced regulations really to support those around allergens.
Well, that was going to be my next question, really, because yeah, there have been some very unfortunate cases. So I was going to ask if things have changed since Natasha's Law, because so that came in after a young lady died after eating a sandwich that had sesame seeds in that weren't on the label. Have things kind of changed dramatically since that's come online?
Yeah, so Natasha's Law obviously brought about new and updated regulations about information on pre-packed for direct sale products. So for those that are unaware of that, it's perhaps items that are packed on ordering. You might go into a store and you might ask for something specific and they will pack it either in front of you or they'll have packed it there that morning. So that is new regulations that came in a couple of years ago, and there is always enhancements, there is always ways to make sure that people are getting this information. Perhaps it's somebody who is up to speed on the information, or maybe it's somebody just selling a couple of cookies at their local school fair. In the lead up to Christmas, we have a lot of Christmas fairs, and if you've just made them at home in your kitchen and then go to sell them at a nice little bun sale, are you aware of that? Making sure that that there's allergens in it, and letting the school know that perhaps there's allergens in that product, or those that are coming up to buy that product. So I think, yes, there's been improvements, and there's also Owen's law, which is another similar situation to the Natasha's law, and it's all about are manufacturing sites really looking at their precautionary allergen labelling, which is where it says they may contain traces of or may contain, are they putting that on there just to cover their backs, or are they actually putting it on there because there is no way of reducing that risk of that allergen being on there? And I think that will be the biggest challenge for manufacturing sites over the next couple of years, that particularly the Food Standards Agency and similar governing bodies are really trying to crack down on the manufacturing sites to say, you really need to be looking at your manufacturing practices and making sure that what is on pack is really relevant and helpful to the consumers.
Yeah, no, that's interesting actually, because going back to my dinner last night, okay, my pasta parcels, at the end of everything it says may also contain mustard and soya. Really? Well, why? How? This looks like sort of covering your options a little bit.
Yeah, and I think there is concern from the consumers that actually do these products contain it. We had the recent recalls around the products that may contain mustard. There was at least 13 notices had come out from the Food Standards Agency not so long ago, and then they sort of reduced what they were asking to be monitored, and then they released a few more just to monitor and be aware of. So manufacturing sites are targeted to say that they should really only put on pack what is going to be a risk to the end consumer, and that could be that because they're produced on a line that perhaps has similar allergens or has that allergen, and there's no way of it not being a trace within that end product.
Yeah. Okay, so this is, on one side, this is very serious stuff. People have been made ill, people have died. But then on the other side, I'm thinking, all right, what about the WI making some jam and selling it at the church hall? You can't have the same rules governing that, because it's just ridiculous. You can't stop the WI selling jam. Or can you? Should you? I don't. My personal opinion, I think, has probably come across.
I mean, everybody, it's all about the information that people have and how they can pass that information on. So, the Food Standards Agency is a really good website to understand, what allergens are perhaps in the products that you're looking at. So, if you are making a jam product, or you're making, buns for a local nursery sale, just to make yourself aware before you take that product into any of these establishments, and all it takes is, perhaps giving that information across to that person that stood in front of you, having the ability, if they say, does this product contain X, Y, and Z, that you can actually be informed to them and say, yes, it does, it contains nuts. So it really is just about educating those that are making and selling those products.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, this is a big topic which will move on and change over the years. So maybe we should park that for the moment and talk about something that maybe more people can get a handle on. Vegans and vegetarians. Now, this weekend coming, we are having a family party, Christmas party, and one of the guests is vegan. So we decided, right, we're going to make vegan food for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like a sensible way forward. Less trouble, and then this particular person doesn't feel left out or anything. Is it easy to get caught out and buy something that isn't vegan or vegetarian by mistake? As far as looking at, or do you have to really go through the list of ingredients with a fine tooth comb and your glasses on?
Yeah, I think veganism, there's no real definition out there. There's no regulation that actually says, veganism is the following. Luckily we've got a lot of governing bodies out there, such as the Vegan Society and the Vegetarian Society, that gives you a little bit of information. But in terms of going into a supermarket, quite often now you will see that there is, perhaps a vegan section, and it's very clearly signposted. It's on the packaging, it's actually signposted in around the marketing. There's supermarkets that perhaps put their vegan products in with the non-vegan products, which may make it slightly harder to find. But even the packaging will be very clear to say, vegan. There has been a lot of debate in the past around, what things can be called vegans. Can you call it a vegan sausage? But also, if you're calling it a sausage, then it's not differentiating it from a meat sausage. And how is that clear to the consumer? So, there's a lot of talk around that in the European Commission around, whether they need to be called something slightly different, or whether it's clear enough to the consumer that they can be called a vegan sausage.
Yeah. So has Brexit made this easier or harder? A couple of times you've mentioned the EU laws. Perhaps we can just bin those.
So we're still fairly governed in the UK by the EU regulations. There are starting to be some differences. So, perhaps it's that the UK has its own health claim register, and actually, if you're selling a product into the UK versus selling it into the EU, that you might need to check both health claim registers. So really, it's more for the manufacturing sites to make sure that, if they're selling it across multiple countries, that they have checked if there's been any updates for the UK and also the EU. Whereas in the past, it was one register, it was one lot of information.
Yeah.
Similar to the additive regulations, that's slightly different now for the UK, and what can be approved for the UK and what can be approved within the EU.
Oh,
so it's really just monitoring. That that there's differences. There's not huge, we still really are following quite a lot of the EU regulations. But the whole point of Brexit and supporting the food labelling was that we would be able to make quicker, more informed choices that the UK can bring into the public eye than we would be able to going through the EU.
Doesn't it just mean that people that make food in Europe won't bother selling it to the UK anymore? They'll just say, I can't be bothered with that. I've got plenty of people to sell it to in Europe. I'll sell it to them. That's what I
mean, we've certainly not seen that. We work with a lot of brands at NSF, and the deterrent of whether they can sell it in the UK or EU doesn't seem to become apparent. If anything, I think more people are wanting to come into the UK to sell their products. On a labelling, if you sell it into the UK and the EU, you have to have the languages of the countries that you sell it into. And it's actually more cost effective for a manufacturing site to have a label that has 6 languages on than have 6 different labels and with a language on each. So they do try and actually continue to sell into, as many countries as they can that will fit onto one label.
I've got a specific question for you, actually. It's not about the upcoming family party this weekend. It's about... we had a vegan guest, this is a while ago, and I gave him some wine. I just had a bottle of wine, so I opened some wine, said, hey, would you like some wine? He said, well, I'm not sure I want that because it's not vegan wine. Now, I hadn't heard that before. Have you come across such thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of variations out there that you can get. There's obviously a lot more non-alcoholic versions of wine and beverages these days. And yes, you can get the vegan.
What is a vegan wine? I mean, it's made out of grapes. There's no animal products in it, is there?
Generally, it's all about the processing and how the processing of the wine is created. I'd love to be a wine connoisseur and be able to sit here and say I know exactly how it's made, but I'm not going to delve into that because definitely somebody who owns a vineyard would be able to go into that a little bit further than I think I would.
Okay, so he did say something about the process, and actually, when you're clearing the wine, you use something to you sprinkle it in the top of the vat, and it goes down through the vat and draws the sediment out of the wine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he said, well, actually, what you chuck in comes from fish somehow, very often. So that was part of the process he was getting at. So anyway, not a vegan wine, so not good enough for him. All right, let's move on to something else, which is a lot of people have spoken about recently. It's been in the news quite a lot, and that's UPF, ultra processed food. Now, I do sometimes think that kind of the whole population of the whole world really is undergoing a massive experiment for the last 20 or 30 years. We're all eating UPF, and no one really quite knows what it's going to do to us. And it's just all a bit of a big experiment. Now, do your customers, or is there a legal requirement for food labeling and anything to do with UPF?
No, there's no legal requirements out there. With the advancement of technology and just, people being able to make more informed choices over the last, sort of 5 to 10 years, people are being made more aware of different types of products out there and what's going into their products.
Yeah. I'm not sure it
There's
is an informed choice, really, because actually UPF, if you start looking, is in everything.
yeah, yeah. Well,
So
with
your
the
informed choice would be not to eat.
with the study that we looked at and that we completed at NSF, so 70% of people were wanting more information around the processing and how that product was processed, which is quite a staggering amount of people. And actually, once something's put out there into the social media and onto the news, a lot of people want to know about it more. They then want to know, well, how do I make sure that I'm picking the right products based on this information? It's still one of those areas that, it will be highlighted quite a lot over the next few years, and it will become, bigger and bigger. And there's still a lot of research around it to really understand the types of products that fall under it and perhaps whether there's reformulation required for those types of products. So I think it's definitely sort of in the infancy at the minute of where it will go. And it's a little bit like vegan and vegetarian, 5, 10, 15 years ago, that was very unheard of. But now you go into a supermarket and, there's plant-based aisles, you can actually walk in and have that pounds. So, it's the unknown a little bit as to where it will go with these types of products, but it's the food landscape is forever changing.
Yeah. Do you potentially have any advice for someone who's like going shopping this afternoon or tomorrow, and they have got this niggling thought about UPF at the back of their mind, though, as far as reading what's on their food?
Yeah, I think, it really is about you going in and making the decisions based on the information that's either on the products or on the packaging, and understanding what it is that you want from that product. We don't always list a lot of information around the processing and the information that goes alongside it, but there is enough information on the packaging at the minute for you to make at least a decision based on some of the information on there. So perhaps it's around the nutrients, perhaps it's around the ingredients that are in there, and they're you can be educated sort of having just even just a quick Google online. There is a lot of information out around this topic, and just spending a little bit of time and really making that decision on your own and trying to decide how far you want to take what you're looking for and what you're trying to get out of your diet. But like I say, I think there's still quite a lot to be done and quite a lot of research to really understand what products fall under that category.
A kind of a rule of thumb that I came across, that is, if you're looking through the list of products that are in something, and if there's just one item in it that might not be in a regular kitchen, you can't find it in the cupboard in your kitchen, then it's UPF. So going back to my dinner last night, I'm just looking through this. There's something here called chicory fiber. All right. Now, there's no chicory fiber in my kitchen. Not even at the back of the cupboard. In the kind of poor forgotten little box that's been there for years. There's no chicory fiber. I don't even know what chicory fiber is. So, by that rule, my dinner last night was UPF, and I suspect an awful lot of food, certainly if it's sort of pre-prepared in any way, would come under UPF. So is that a sensible way for the layman to think of things?
Yeah, I think it really, like I said, there's not a huge amount out there at the minute in terms of what ingredients fall under it. We have the novel food regulations as an example. So if there really is an ingredient that hasn't, isn't commonly used and isn't in a lot of people's cupboards and hasn't been commonly used since prior to 1997, then that falls under a specific regulation. So although, you might have looked at your label and seen that there was a chicory fiber in there, actually for somebody that's completed label reviews for the last 10 years, I see that ingredient quite commonly. So actually, it's perhaps the different types of products
Right.
people buy or what's being sold on the
Are you going to let me into
on
the
the
secret of what
market.
it is?
I'll let you go away and do a little bit of research. It's always good to go away and have a look at different ingredients and see what else is in there, and make up your mind as to whether you think it falls under that category.
Okay. All right. So we will carry on not knowing what chicory fiber is. Never mind. I got another question. This is more of a general question, actually, and this might be unfair, but I'm going to ask it anyway. going to buy bread at the supermarket, which I don't really do now. I normally buy bread at the market, at sort of the stalls, the market, and but just recently I bought another loaf of bread at the supermarket, and it's different. It's like there's nothing to it. You cut into it, it just squishes, it falls apart. I mean, it smells nice, it looks nice, but when you actually cut it, it just kind of disappears. What's happened to our bread? And can we tell by looking at the labels? Are you familiar with what I mean? Supermarket bread just falls apart. You try and butter it, the knife goes straight through it. It's just a completely different product to proper bread that you might make at home or buy from a proper baker's.
Yeah, I suppose it probably depends on the type of bread and where you buy the bread from. I mean, a while ago, almost about 10 years ago now, they looked at reducing the salt in products such as bread. And I'm not saying that's what's caused the impact, but, it was one of the products out there that contained the highest amount of salt. So, as part of just, trying to reduce, products that people eat every single day and trying to make them a little bit healthier. It doesn't always have an impact on the constitute of the bread and how it feels and how you butter it that morning. Yeah, I guess it's probably just where you buy the bread from
I think
and the
it's the
type of bread that you're
process.
looking for.
Supermarkets want to make bread very quickly, and if you make bread properly, you've got to leave it to rise, to prove for a few hours. Da, da, da. And they found ways to cut that out, so you can get the bread to rise in 5 minutes or something, as opposed to a couple of hours. Chuck it in the oven, smells great, looks great until you cut it. So it's a change in the process, and probably it's the ingredients as well. But I must admit, this isn't my world at all, so I don't know. But this isn't something that you've sort of come across, labeling of bread, and that's changed recently.
Not particularly. I mean, they're always looking at, the flour and the flour that goes into bread and perhaps the ingredients that are in it. But just like everything, as you say, processing changes over time. Everybody's trying to look at more efficient ways of being able to get those products not only quicker onto shelf, but also, to make such a vast variety of products. So where manufacturing sites in the past perhaps created one or two types of bread, they're now perhaps creating 20 plus types of bread. And there's only so many minutes in the day and so many minutes in the week to be able to create that. But yeah, it's perhaps going to your local bakery who don't mass produce. If you're looking at your bread in the morning, you think I can't even butter that thing, and actually going to find somewhere that
Well,
just
that
bakes
yeah,
10. Yeah,
that's what's happened to me. Yeah. All
yeah.
right. So when you are doing your shopping for your family, for your Christmas event or whatever party, um, do you look at the labels? What do you look for in labels?
Yeah, so I've got a little boy, so quite often I'm buying, kids snacks and kids food, and he goes through a rate of I don't know what before I have to go back out and buy it all over again. So, for me when I'm shopping, I do like to look at the new products. I like to see what's out there, and I like to see what the supermarkets are bringing out, and I'm probably one of those people that's quite influenced by that. And when I understand labels, I do spend a lot of time, having a look at it, having a look at the nutrition side of it. I'm an avid gym goer, so for me, I focus on a lot of my protein and trying to increase the amount of protein I have on a day-to-day basis. So probably for me, it's my preferences around my family and what I'm looking for them to make sure that they're having the most healthiest options. And we all like a bit of indulgence. I'm not going to say that I don't sit there and enjoy a quality street and in the lead up to Christmas, or any other types of chocolate out there in the lead up to Christmas. But it's all about enjoying it and having that indulgence, but also making quality choices around what I'm trying to buy. And perhaps that's quality in terms of the premium pricing type products because I fancy a little bit of a treat, or perhaps it's because I'm really working towards a specific gym session and looking for something that's a bit more higher in protein.
Goodness, right. So lots of food for thought there. No, actually, pun was intended there a little bit, I think. If people are listening to this and thinking, goodness, there's a lot of stuff here. I really need to find out a bit more about this. What is a good source that Joe Public, so someone with no kind of prior information or prior knowledge, to help them interpret all this massive amount of information that is kind of on the back of the food packets we get. Where can people find some good info to help them through this maze?
Yeah, so some of the best websites that you can go on is to the Food Standards Agency websites or the equivalent for the areas around the UK. So perhaps it's the Food Standards Agency Ireland. And there's also the Food and Drink Federation. If you're really wanting some facts and some really good knowledge, you can just have a look on there. They've got things that don't make it overly complicated. You don't have to work in the food regulation industry to really go on and understand it. And social media is in our hands every day. So perhaps it's, a quick Google search, but trying to use the websites that are a little bit more legit, like your Food Standards Agency.
Excellent. All right, look, Jessica, thank you so much. Sorry, I called you Jessica. You're not Jessica, you're Katie. Katie, thank you so much for chatting. I think this is a really interesting topic, and it will run and run. So I can see you coming back on when the whole UPF labelling thing has taken off. But
absolutely,
thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, really, really lovely to speak to you today. Thank you.
A big thank you to my guest this week, and that was Katie Glover talking about labels, and she's food labels, and she's with NSF. Thank you very much to you for listening, and have a healthy week. Until next week.
Thanks for listening to the Relax Back UK show. Join me, Mike Dilk, again next week for more fascinating interviews and chat. If you're listening to the podcast version, please subscribe, like, and share it with your family and friends. And have a healthy week. Until next week.